My name is, okay, there's a recording to this webinar, and I hope everybody will be okay with it. So my name is Jennifer Ho. I'm the Deputy Director of APCASO. We're also the host of the APCRG Platform, which is the Asia Pacific Community Rights and Gender Communication and Coordination Platform. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you very much for making yourself available to be here with us this afternoon. And for those of you who have been with us in our previous webinar, welcome again, and thank you also much appreciation for your time to be here with us. As reflected on the flyer for the webinar, what we want to do this afternoon is to really spend some time to share with everybody a little bit of an update on what's new in the Global Fund New Funding Model NFM4 process. I think most people might be aware, and some of you might already be in the midst of the NFM4 funding request preparation process at your country, whether that's through the civil society consultation process, the country dialogue process, or just being involved in trying to do some advocacy with your CCM on what goes into the next funding request for your country. What we have noticed, though, that there's been a significant number of updates and changes to this new process, and partially, I think it's reflective of all of us coming out from the COVID period. There's been a new board strategy that just came out earlier this year. And I think there's also been a lot of discussions around the allocation level, given the news that we have all just received about the replenishment for the Global Fund for this next cycle. I think depending on your perspective, some people are remaining a bit more hopeful that the figures look good. Some of us are a bit more pessimistic, especially given the global economic situation, that especially the allocation to our region might not be as to the level as that we hope for. So we want to take this opportunity to just provide a space for all of us to come together, to share information, to discuss, and to also talk a little bit more about how, as the APCRG, as the Global Fund Secretariat, especially we have Leslie, who is here representing the Global Fund's Community Engagement Strategic Initiative, here with us today as well, to talk about how we could better support communities and civil society engagement in the NFM4 process that's coming up very quickly. Just upfront as well, I believe the allocation letters for the countries are due to be made available by early December, around the 7th of December. That's the date I'm hearing. So I think the more that we could be prepared and the more that we know what's happening, that will give us a better chance of advocating for communities and civil society's need going forward. So without further ado, just let me quickly go through the 3 key objectives for our webinars today. And namely, as I mentioned, to provide information and updates about the NFM4, to also share about some of the available TA opportunity, technical assistance opportunity that can be accessed to support civil society and community-led organizations in their engagement with their respective countries as they prepare for NFM4, and to identify ways on how and what kind of support APCRG can provide to civil society and community-led organization in the region as we move forward with the NFM4 preparation process. So let me stop here for now and turn the floor over to Jeff before I introduce our first speaker. In terms of the lineup of the speakers today, again, we will have Leslie here to provide us some updates directly from the Global Fund Secretariat on what's new in the Global Fund NFM4 and what we as civil society and communities need to know. And then we will also have Jeff Akaba from APCASO APCRG Platform sharing a little bit more information about available TA opportunity. We have a colleague from Laos, Vien, who will also be sharing with us a little bit about their experience in accessing and receiving TA support as a civil society group. And then lastly, we'll close out with some next step as well. So let me turn the floor over to Jeff to get us started with the mentee exercise. Yeah, thanks, over.
Thank you so much, Jen. So for those who are joining, I think it's obvious that Jen and I are seated with each other. So this will be an informal webinar, and we really want to make use of this space to have a discussion on about learning about NFM4, or some people are beginning to call it the R7, and also share insights and suggestions on how we can engage and what are the opportunities out there that are available for civil societies and communities to engage, just like what Jen mentioned. Making this informal, we are making use of Mentimeter for you to share your thoughts, or if you have any questions on the two presentations that we have today. So if I can just share very quickly, if you can log in, open a new browser or use your phone and type in the browser www.menti.com, and then use the code 76276598. So again, open a new browser and then type in menti.com. And then once the page opens, you write the number 76276598. And then you should be able to see this graphic here and also the question. Do you have any questions to the Global Fund on the NFM4? This is directed to the first presentation. So as you start logging in, this Mentimeter will remain open throughout the entire presentations. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to input them to the Mentimeter. We will come back to the Mentimeter later on after the presentation, and then we'll respond to your question.
Great, thanks. Yeah, great, thanks, Jeff. So again, I think we want to utilize the Mentimeter as another platform rather than in the chat in the Zoom in terms of trying to collate and gather some whatever questions you have as you listen through the presentation. So please utilize that as we listen to our first presentation for the day, which is from Leslie Odendo from the Global Fund CRG. Actually, it's the CESI department now these days, and Leslie has been providing support to all the regional platforms in our work to support communities as we prepare for the upcoming allocation cycle. So without further ado, let me turn the floor over to Leslie, and please feel free to add to your self-introduction as well, Leslie. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Jen and Jeffrey, and to all of you. I'm so happy to be with all of you today. As Jen said, my name is Leslie. I'm a consultant for the Global Fund, fairly part-time, supporting the platforms, and other parts of my work is usually around Global Fund advocacy. So I sometimes am very afraid of these webinars because I sometimes say things about the Global Fund that maybe could get me into trouble. So just if you find me doing that, it's not because I'm having a bad day. It's because I think these things are very tricky, and I think this is a very interesting. The Global Fund is a very, very interesting machine when it comes to applying for your funding. So yeah, basically, as Jen was saying, today really what I want to share with you is what is new. I think a lot of you have been involved in previous funding cycles. So it's really looking at what is new, but not so much what is new, but more what is new for your advocacy, in terms of like potential tools for advocacy to get community priorities into the funding requests. Because as Jen said, we did not have a successful replenishment, despite what, the Global Fund's PR machine wants to tell you. As you know, the aim was 18 billion, and unfortunately, we just scraped by into 14 billion. We almost lost all of the strategic initiatives. Luckily, the strategic initiatives have been saved, so there's 500 million. But the reality is that for a lot of the strategic initiatives, so for some of them like human rights, their allocation has gone from like 65 million down to 24 million over the 3-year period. So it really is an example of how important it is for us to be able to push for our priorities in the country funding requests, because the strategic initiatives, the funding's already gone down. The country, the funding's also going to go down. And the tricky thing is, I know I'm based in South Africa. In my region, I'm not sure in your region, but we're worried about a scenario where countries say, do you want ARVs or do you want human rights? Do you want TB medicines or do you want gender programming? So we're going to have to be really, really prepared to fight for our priorities and to show that they're just as important as some of the other parts that, are easier to fund or like more commodity driven. So let me not digress. So the first thing is I'm going to talk a bit about what is community engagement in the Global Fund application cycle. What could it look like? What could look like success? What are some of the opportunities? And then I'm going to look at what's new in the NFM4 process, including the program essentials, the community engagement minimum expectations, the gender equality marker, and the costing tool. So those are the 3 things. So firstly, Jeff, I almost wanted to put you on the spot and ask you in our kind of TV talk show host style, what for you does successful community engagement in the Global Fund process, like the application process now, what does it look like for you?
For me, it really what it looks like is that civil society, especially those who are already organized, TB community, TB affected community, and TB survivors groups, to be engaging as early as the National Strategic Plan review process. And if that is not happening during this cycle, at least in the anticipated country dialogues and through the CCM, key population representatives, organized, and even those who are not organized yet, TB affected community groups, including TB survivors, already have initial discussions and have intelligence and knowledge of when these meetings will happen, when these dialogues will take place at the very onset. It's very important so that those who will be engaged, either government agencies or members of CCM, will be engaged in the funding request process in the country, will be aware that there's a demand from civil society to participate.
Amazing. So, I mean, Jeff's used the lens of the TB communities, but it could really be for malaria and HIV, or even, cross-cutting RSSH. But exactly that. I think that what you're highlighting early on in the process, transparent access to information, and being kind of organized early so that all the stakeholders know that there's a civil society and communities demand, and what those demands are. So I almost, didn't want to put these slides because I'm obviously preaching to people who know what successful community engagement might look like. And, the reality is that there's a lot of challenges in these processes, as Jeff is, the ideal would be that we're, we have all the information early, that we're involved as should be proper, that, there's transparent information sharing, and that, people are aware of the community demands, and that people are also aware of like the need for, community engagement and community priorities. So But that's exactly what this webinar is about, is that there are challenges, right? Because we have country ownership, because we have, governments leading a lot of the CCMs, and we know that it doesn't always happen like this. But here are some of the things that can help. Obviously, information and knowledge is going to be key, and the CRG platform is here to support you in that at a country level. The TA provided can be really helpful and supportive. Jeff is going to talk to us a little bit more about that in a second, about the TA that's available. I think understanding your region, your country, your area, exactly where the gaps are. The thing that's really important to realize at this stage is that, as Jen was saying, there is going to be less country allocations, most likely, across the regions. And so how do we really, as community groups, prioritize and make sure that, for example, in the community priority annex, that it's not a shopping list, that it is really, really targeted and specific, because that's going to be a lot more likely to be included. And then also, I think the importance of data, right? So have you created new data? So for some of us in our countries, key populations are criminalized, etc. Maybe there's the size estimates at the national official levels are, underrepresenting. And so maybe you've done some community-led monitoring and you have a better sense, or whatever data it is that your community has developed and that you've used that. I think having a really strong engagement plan across communities and civil society in the country is going to be really, really key. It becomes really challenging, of course. Different key populations will have different priorities, different constituencies will have different needs. But I think in the face of, there's one annex or, these limited resources, it's important to start having those dialogues really, really early, so that by the time, you're at the country dialogue or in the writing, in the proposal development stage, you're very clear on these are the collectives, and that there isn't, kind of infighting or anything that's watering your down. Just as Jeff said, you want to have representatives or people that are participating in the national dialogues, in the NSP reviews, and that can really, really push for your various priorities that you've agreed on. And then I think also very, very important is speaking to the writing consultants, knowing who the different people are in your country process. There's maybe ways that we can all work together to find out who that is, because some of our partners, like Expertise Française, for example, they will support the writing consultants. Can we help find those names? All the different pieces in the Global Fund puzzle, we're all going to have to work together so that we can, most strategically do that. So that's just, the ideal. Obviously, the reality is sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. And I think what the Global Fund has tried to do is to think about ways that the different partners in the Global Fund partnership can leverage different pieces in the process to push different priorities. So the first thing that's really new in the NFM4 process is program essentials, right? Now, what are program essentials? As the name implies, it's basically things that the Global Fund, based on global guidance, so, based on your WHO guidelines and your UNAIDS guidelines, they are what are described as the key programmatic elements, the different parts that will be needed within a national program to achieve certain targets in the HIV, TB, and malaria response. It's obviously based on the global AIDS strategy targets. It's based on the WHO different strategies and so on. And it's basically looking at what are the most impactful interventions that we'll need and who are the people that will need them the most, especially in the context of dwindling resources. There's also, obviously, given the new strategy that Jen and Jeff referred to, communities are very much at the center. Human rights and gender responses are also there. And the question for us is, how do we integrate all of these into our existing country programs, especially in the face of the fact that we know some of the strategic initiatives, funding is dwindling on that side. And so it's really about how do we integrate it into our national funding request. So in terms of the program essentials, they'll basically be considered throughout the grant cycle. In all the applications that the applicants, the countries will have to outline how advanced the country is, what level they're at in each of the program essentials. And when they're basically like, once you've prioritized a program essential that needs more support, the Global Fund will support that throughout the cycle. So basically from the country dialogue to the funding request development, to grant making, to implementation, it's really like understanding the program essentials and what you're advocating for in each of them is going to be really, really important. Secondly, you have what's called the modular framework. And I cannot overemphasize this more, that the modular framework is your best friend in all of this, because essentially whatever's in the modular, if something is outside of the modular framework, it means it cannot be financed. So for example, I've worked with community groups where, the priority has identified has been quite broad. And then we've had to go to the modular framework and say, okay, let's say we want to, end gender-based violence in our country. What are the specific, in the modular framework, what are the specifics that I can go look for and say, okay, we're doing mental health services for GBV survivors. That's in the modular framework. So in my aim to end gender-based violence, this is an intervention that can help for that. And so basically, for the modular framework, depending on what your area of priority is, or, for your group, you can look across, there's, prevention for all the different KPs, and then across to TB and malaria, and of course, RSSH, resilient and sustainable systems for health. This is your health system strengthening component. So there you also have community system strengthening, which is of course going to be of importance to all of us. This slide just shows you now how this is broken down in the modular framework. So for example, let's say prevention for KPs is something that you want to push for, or you're working in harm reduction. So you're going to go into the module that would be on needle and syringe programs. And then under that module, there's going to be, if we had 3 days together, we would go through each and every single module and see what each intervention is. What I'm trying to do is show you how to use these tools to specifically for your priority. So let's say I'm like a drug, my community is people who use drugs, and I want to prioritize harm reduction services. Then obviously I'm going to go to this module and advocate that those are included. So for an example, HIV, here's HIV. You have different components. Here's HIV primary prevention. As I said, harm reduction is one of those. So I'm going to basically advocate for this. If something is not in the modular framework, it's just not going to be financed. So my advice is look for something that, fits under the modular framework. And then the second thing I would say is there's also guidance on optimal service delivery arrangements, right? So this is how these services should be delivered. And what has been done is, because obviously the strategy is about community leadership and community service delivery, they've also outlined for each of the components which are services that are seen as where community-led organizations and community-based organizations are well placed to deliver. So for example, you have like treatment literacy, or under prevention, there's, services for KPs, including harm reduction, peer-based services. So whatever it is that you're trying to advocate for, and where like community service delivery would be best in your country, look under here, under the guidance on optimal service delivery arrangements, and advocate accordingly. Right. So that's basically in terms of the content of the modular framework and the different issues that you can push for. Another advocacy tool that is new is what's called the community engagement minimum expectations. Now, what will happen is that for each of the funding applications, there will be minimum community engagement expectations that will need to be met and like completed. So basically, there's the three expectations. The one is that the funding request and the allocation letter are made available in a transparent and inclusive process. I know from the last cycle that in many, many countries, communities did not see the allocation letters at all until, January, or, they just couldn't get, so that is really, really important. Then in grant making, that there's timely access to information on the status of grant negotiations and changes to the grant. So basically within the CCM mechanisms that information is shared in a transparent way. And then in grant implementation, it's that also that the CCM representatives have timely access to information, and different KPIs are being developed for these minimum expectations. And this is something that, communities will also be able to submit if it's not being happening. The third component that's new is what's called the gender equality marker. So this is something that aims to, kind of push for more gender equality. And basically what will happen is that as countries submit their funding requests, they will have to score themselves according to what minimum criteria they have implemented. So the first is, that they're not like meeting the criteria, and then obviously they need to do a gender analysis at a minimum so that it gets reinforced. The one score is where, a gender assessment has been done, the findings have informed the funding request, there's interventions contributing to gender equality, and so on. And then your score 2 is when, one of the main priorities of the funding request is to advance gender equality. So basically, countries will score themselves. And I think this is also an opportunity for civil society and communities to do shadow scores, or to think about how you can influence this process or interrogate this process. Like, if your country's putting certain scores or giving information that is not true, you could challenge that. And then the TRP will assess the funding requests, and then all the scores will be collated, and the strengths, weaknesses, and adaptations will be recommended by the TRP. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the community costing support. I think a challenge that was recognized was that sometimes, communities, we have our priorities, but it's not like we're not sure how to cost and, be able to budget for it within the specific programs. So Frontline AIDS was contracted to develop a costing tool, and it's now being translated into French, Spanish, Russian, and Arabic. They're going to run monthly orientation webinars for CRG consultants. I think that's already started. And then virtual mentorship and accompaniment, and hopefully it will be adapted and revised in March, April, based on so window 1 consultants are already being trained on this and will use this, and then it will be adapted in advance of window 2. In terms of timelines, where we are right now is, we're like at the end of Q4, I guess. But yeah, the application materials, a lot of them have been released. I think there's still some waiting. There's the e-learnings, webinars, trainings such as this one. Then the application approach criteria will be released later this month by the Grant Advisory Committee. And then in December, as Jen said, the aim is 7th December, the allocation letters will be sent out. And then the funding request submission. So, you know, for window 1 countries, you'll have the country dialogues and the writing teams and so on. And then window 1 countries are by 10 March, window 2, 29 March, window 3, 21 August, and it goes all the way to window 6 in 2024, but I can't think that far ahead, and I don't think any of us should. I don't know if there's any questions. Maybe Jen and Jeff, should I quickly show the slides on the resources, or we're going to send those around?
Do you want to just quickly show the slides on the resources? I think that's helpful. And then what we could do, then we'll go back to the Menti and to see some of the questions that people put already.
I'm scared of the Menti. Okay. So yeah, so maybe just for your information, there's a lot of technical briefs in development. These ones in October, the slides are a bit outdated. The ones in October are already out, and some are still to come. I think the technical briefs are also very useful according to your priority for you to see how to link it in the modular framework. I think some of the newer ones of interest are the ones on like addressing HIV and TB in prisons, pre-trial detention and closed settings. Yeah. And then there's other resources being developed. There's a number of e-learnings and webinars that have been developed by the Access to Funding department, including on community system strengthening, on KPs, health equity and mental health, which I know is a priority for your region, country dialogue expectations. So even the webinars that have happened in the past, yeah, Jeff, I'm not sure if you're going to share these, but the link is there to the webinar recording, so people can, yeah. These are the information notes. Like I say, the information notes and the modular frameworks really your biggest guide. This is more on the technical briefs and which ones are new and which ones will just be updated. Oh, sorry, another area that's new, just for your interest, is on protecting against sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. So there's a guidance note on that, and there's training being given to all CCMs and PRs and SRs. So hopefully that's something that will be improved in this year's, in this cycle's request. Thanks. I'll stop there and see if.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I know that we didn't give you much time, and that was a lot of information that you tried to pack in for us. I think a number of people have asked if we'll be sharing the slides. We will, but I think for me, one of the walkaway key message, right, as I think Leslie couldn't say this slide more, was that, you know, like anything that we want, they need to be like within the module framework. So really become familiarized with the module framework for your respective I guess disease area, as the sort of citing committee prepare for the next few months of the funding request process would be something I really would encourage as well. I do also want to take note of the e-learning materials that are available on the website. And I personally actually recently have gone and looked at some of those and used some of those in some of my trainings. And I do find them incredibly useful and really well put together. So I would highly encourage, if you haven't had a chance to look at the e-learning like deck of what's available, please do, because I think that's another really good way of trying to build more awareness, understanding, and incapacitate our communities and civil society partners in their understanding of the Global Fund and the various pieces that's relating to funding request development going forward. So let me stop there and turn the floor back to Jeff to help us look at the Menti and the questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. So we have 2 questions on the Menti. And for those who have just joined, or if you have any questions or comments, or if you like to participate in the conversation, feel free to use our Menti. So log into menti.com and use the code that you see on the screen, 76276598. So Leslie, we have two questions. So the first one is, will Myanmar have, does Myanmar will entitle to NFM4? And then the second is how young people in our country submit the proposal to incorporate in the country proposal if there's no youth network.
Jeff, do you know the answer to the first question?
Yeah.
Maybe you take that one because I'm looking things up and I don't want.
Maybe you can answer the second first, and then I can present very quickly the windows of submissions for countries.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the question. If I understand it, I mean, I think that in countries where there is no youth network, or even in countries where there's like no youth representative on the CCM or anything like that, my advice is to work with whatever it is that you have. So either work with either like the community or like the person living with HIV rep or the KP rep or whatever representatives that you do. Like if you don't have a network, then you as an individual can still work either through the platform, or you could work directly with CCM members in your country, you know, to be part of the kind of broader country dialogue, or to be, you know, to influence what happens at the CCM level. So even if you don't have your own network, and I think this goes beyond also like if you don't have a seat on the CCM, like your constituency necessarily, work with what you have. So whatever groups that you know are influencing the process, whether it's through the platform, whether it's through another country organization, or whether it's through the CCM reps, take that opportunity, you know, because to say like we don't have a youth network, there's still other opportunities, I think. Yeah, I'll stop there. And yes, we will share the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Let me just share very quickly the list of the countries and their submission windows. Sorry.
I think the short answer right now to the Myanmar question, it's yes. That Myanmar is eligible for an NFM4 funding. I think the tricky thing depends on which disease area we're talking about. It's who will be responsible, right, at the PRs and stuff for receiving the funding. Over to you, Jane.
So you can see the list of the countries and their anticipated window submissions for this cycle. This is based on the previous cycles submission window. So you can check it on APCASO.org, and then I can paste the entire link later in the chat box. So for window 1, which is going to be in March, so the countries are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Lao PDR, Mongolia, the multi-country RAI, which is malaria, Myanmar, so we'll also submit under window 1, Philippines, and Vietnam. So all means all the 3 disease components are anticipated to be submitted under window 1. Window 2 is going to be the TB component of Afghanistan, Cambodia, India, the multi-country Western Pacific, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Thailand, and Timor-Leste. Window 3, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, the TB component, India, malaria component, Iran, all 3 disease components, the multi-country Western Pacific, the TB and HIV components, Nepal, all 3, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. For window 4, Sri Lanka HIV component. Window 5 would be the TB component of Sri Lanka, and then Windows 6 would be Malaysia for all three disease components. Again, in terms of the submission windows, these are the anticipated, already confirmed submission windows for all the 6 windows. The technical assistance request deadline, I can discuss this later. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And just again, I think some of the countries, once they receive the allocation letter, they might want to change their submission deadline. So these dates might shift a little bit for some of the countries. So just check back to our website regularly if you want to be updated on where things are going forward. Yeah. Are there any other questions from the group before we move on to the next presentation? Anything more on the Menti or in the chat?
We still have, so one of the questions is, who decides which countries apply to which window?
Leslie, did you hear that question?
The short answer is the Global Fund decides. But how the Global Fund decides is that it's based on previous cycles. So, for example, my country, South Africa, we submitted in the final window of the last round. So we've just started implementing our 3-year cycle. So we're only going to apply in Windows 6, which is like end of 2024, because we've just started, because in the last cycle. So it's really dependent on which cycle you submitted in last time, because the Global Fund, everything is in 3 years, right? So right now, this is the allocation period 2023 to 2025. And it really depends, because some people for the previous allocation period just started implementing. So those will be the final ones. For others, they need their top-ups now, basically. So they will need to apply first. So that it is, I do find it very weird, that even as staff of Global Fund, we don't have the exact windows, at least for Windows 1, 2, and 3, because we have to plan, right? But that's
So, my understanding is that also depends on burn rates, right? If a country is like efficiently utilizing their funding according to their work plan, then that's the window should remain quite consistent, because you don't want to have a gap in services. And that's why I think a lot of time we do base on the previous cycle with the assumption that we don't want to have an interruption, a funding gap in some of these ongoing services, especially for communities. I think I'm seeing where countries have requested to have their windows shifted, either because they need to do some reprogramming, they have some, so I think that's kind of how when things get shifted at times. But I think for the most part, we do, I think the ideal scenario is things are going according to plan, and people will just submit according to previous, just to make sure that we keep the services going. Jeff, anything you'd like to add?
I think we don't have any other additional questions or comments from our participants.
Yeah, okay, then maybe this is a good time to kind of transition to our next presentation, which then it's really, so we kind of are getting a better sense of what are some of the key changes, what are some of the key anticipated timeline, points of opportunity for community and civil society to engage in. I think one consistent messages that we get back from community, though, is that they need some sort of technical support in these kind of engagement, whether that's capacity building or just support to facilitate community consultation, to get groups together, to how do you engage young people, right? That on this question of there no youth network, how can they input and where the point of opportunity for them, what group how could we better support that process of collaboration amongst key populations of the society group in the country dialogue process. So let me turn the floor over to Jeff to share with us a bit of updates and some opportunities for TA support for communities and maybe some experience sharing as well from our partner. Jeff, over to you.
Thanks, Jen. So before I start my presentation, I already moved the Mentimeter to the next slide. So as we go through the presentations and as you listen to the presentation, try to think about what would be some of your potential technical assistance requests to focus on. And this can be something that we can look at later on, and we will reach out to you later to follow up whether you have any interest to really proceed with a technical assistance request or any form of technical assistance support that we can facilitate, either through the APCRG Technical Assistance Program or through the technical partners, so which the technical assistance programs you will see later in the presentation. Let me stop this for a bit and then show you the set of presentation. Okay, so just a bit of disclaimer with regards to this presentation. This has been shared to all the regional CRG platforms, including the APCRG platform by the Global Fund Secretariat. And this includes the technical partners, technical assistance support, especially around the Global Fund funding request process. So if you have any questions that would probably go beyond this presentation, what we can do as the APCRG platform is we can facilitate and reach out to our technical partners. And I see one of our technical partners is actually here in this webinar. So I hope they can respond to some of the questions later if there will be anything specific. Actually, 2 technical partners in this room today, so that's really good. All right, so the list of the technical partners and their technical assistance programs that we will present today would be the GIZ Backup Health, the La Initiative from Expertise France, the Rollback Malaria from the Rollback Malaria Partnership, Stop TB Partnership. There's also the UNAIDS Technical Support Mechanism, the Global Fund through the Community Engagement Strategic Initiative, through the CRG platforms, the regional CRG platforms, and last but not the least, the national CCM funding for civil society organizations and communities. So the first technical assistance program is with the Backup Health. And with this specific program, in terms of the modality of support, they have 3 pathways of supporting civil society and communities all across the 3 disease components. So the first one, so their consultants. So you can request directly through Backup Health or through the different embassies, mainly the German embassy, but also the other embassies that are supporting Backup Health, to request for a specific technical need. And then they would hire a consultant from their end, and they will link you with the agreed consultant. The second one is a direct granting or sub-granting through the organization, providing resources to be able to address a specific need, depending on the arrangement of the technical need. And then the third one is a more longer-term institutional strengthening that goes beyond a particular technical need. So if there's an intent or felt need of an organization to apply for technical assistance, specific to the Global Fund funding request, and goes beyond, for instance, to organizational development, capacity building for your members in your networks, you can apply through the stage or the institutional strengthening funding. In terms of the eligible countries, so in Asia Pacific, they're only focusing for 2 countries, so that's Cambodia and also Nepal. So here are the detailed specific technical needs that the Backup Health can support. So empowering communities to engage in the Global Fund funding request, building the capacities to engage in the country dialogues, including funding the community consultations prior to the country dialogues themselves, and support efforts throughout the entire Global funding request, not just in the very beginning, but also support to the writing, and also once the review from the TRP or the technical review panel returns to the country for revision of the funding request. They also support programmatic and performance risks specific to the Global Fund implementation, and also in preparation for specific Global Fund requests in the area of performance, both technical and financial. And they also provide specific technical assistance throughout the Global Fund implementation that goes beyond the Global Fund funding request itself. The second is the initiative from Expertise France. In terms of eligible countries, so they focus in the Mekong region, so that's Cambodia, Laos PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam. And for their type of support, they have two channels where they can provide technical and financial support. So the first one is through the expertise channel. So these are short-term technical assistance support. Again, depends on a specific technical need. So for example, if you'd like to convene or facilitate a consultation amongst your members of your network or specific key population group, you can apply for the expertise channel. There's also the project channel, wherein this particular channel is a bit longer term. So if you are implementing a particular program that is deemed to be scaled up, or you think is something that can be scaled up and can be proposed as part of the Global Fund funding request, you can apply for the project channel. The project channel also provides support for capacity building activities and also for mobilization activities. There's also another layer in terms of the expertise channel, which can be applied through the CCM or through the Ministry of Health. Given that this is from the expertise front, with at the national level, you can access the support through the French embassy. The main connection would be through the government agency, but community and civil society can also reach out independently through the French embassy. The next one is the rollback malaria, or the RBM technical assistance support. So given that this is specific to RBM partnership, it's not necessary that you have to be a member of RBM partnership, but they will mainly support countries, civil society organizations, and malaria-affected communities in countries where they are implementing the malaria matchbox, and where there is intention to include the malaria matchbox in the Global Fund funding request. So in this case, all countries are applicable and eligible to apply for technical assistance through RBM. And usually what they do is they offer an international consultant paired with a local consultant. So if a civil society organization or a malaria affected, or even not a malaria affected, but a key population net organization is proposing a local consultant to be able to support and complement the work of the international consultant, they would be able to provide the support of both consultants as well. And what they usually do is they want to work hand in hand with the civil society or affected community organization in the country, particularly in terms of convening consultations with malaria affected communities and also with the writing needs. The next one is a Stop TB partnership. And through the Stop TB partnership, they have 4 channels of support. So the first one is the short-term technical assistance. So this is a direct request, mostly direct outreach from the Stop TB partnership to either the National TB program or through a Stop TB partnership partner at the country, or the Stop TB partnership so-called chapters in the countries as well. But this does not delimit the level of support that they can provide. So any civil society organization who intend to convene and mobilize TB-affected communities for the Global Fund funding request process would be able to access the technical assistance support. They also have the comprehensive TB community support packages that would include a small sub-granting, a technical assistance program, and capacity building, but this goes directly through their Stop TB partnership network at the countries. You might probably know this already, the Challenge Facility for Civil Society, which is being released every year to a number of organizations. This is a proposal granting mechanism that the Stop TB partnership provides. And some of the organizations can include their activities. So you can include your activities in the application for the challenge facility for civil society. The last and not the least is their ongoing support through the country level Stop TB partnership platforms. So countries like Indonesia, for example, with the Stop TB partnership Indonesia, I believe that the TB People Cambodia will also be released soon. Those kinds of channels will be channels that where Stop TB partnership can provide support to participate in the Global Fund funding request. Next up, we have the UNAIDS technical support mechanism. And with the UNAIDS TSM, the support is directly through the UNAIDS country office. So if a civil society organization or a key population-led organization intends to tap the TSM or the technical support mechanisms TA fund, you have to engage with your UNAIDS country office, or you can write directly to the UNAIDS regional support team and request for a particular specific technical need. So what are the different activities that they support and fund? So global fund applications, participation in the NSP through efficiency enhancing interventions. If you would like to include some of the program essentials that Leslie mentioned earlier and want to ensure that it is included in the funding request, you can apply through the TA fund. And also strengthening civil society organizations in terms of capacity by mobilization and also advocacy. In terms of the country, so you can see on the right side of the screen, the countries where TSM is present. So it's Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. The next one is the short-term TA support of the Global Fund Community Engagement Strategic Initiative. So this is mainly through the APCRG platform. And this is something, at least from us, we can facilitate, not really control, because we are not the one deciding the approval of the technical assistance requests.
So we could advocate for you.
And we can advocate, yes. So under this TA program, there are 3 tracks of activities that you can request on. So the first track is about the situational analysis and needs assessment. So if you want to understand and prioritize CRG specific needs of your communities and your peers, or if you would like to conduct a community-led review of the previous Global Fund or the current Global Fund grant that's being implemented in your country, that's under track A. Track B is if you want to facilitate community consultations and also use the funding to support your coordination and engagement through the entire writing process. That's under track 2. Track C is about the costing support. So Leslie mentioned this earlier, the costing exercise that's already available. If you would like to participate in the costing of the programs that will be proposed as part of the funding request, you can apply that under track C. So what you'll do is you can go to our website or you can email me directly or the APCRG platform directly to request for the NFM4 technical assistance request form, of which you can see on the right side. It will ask specific questions about your intended technical assistance request, and then you will have to send it or submit it directly to the Global Fund Secretariat, of which the email you will see also in the website that you can see on the screen. But we can help facilitate, and just like what Chen said, advocate for the approval of your technical assistance request. This is very specific to the NFM4 or the R7, this upcoming round of funding requests. But the APCRG platform, the Global Fund Secretariat through the APCRG platform also provides a more general technical assistance request that is applicable for the entire Global Fund implementation. But for this specific NFM4 application, this is the route that you need to take. Okay, last but not the least is the CCM allocation. to support communities in engaging in the Global Fund funding request. So as most of us know, there's a 15% allocation of annual CCM funding for community and civil society engagement activities. And some of the activities or expenses that can be charged this 15% would include mobilization activities, travel support and logistics support to communities and civil society representatives of the CCM who would want to participate in the internal CCM mechanism and related meetings related to the Global Fund funding request, communication costs, and also support to the election processes, and also the constituency support for the key population representatives of CCM to be able to operate, such as convenings, consultations with your constituency, and also bringing even some of your constituency members to be observers in CCM processes. So you can use the 15% allocation from the annual CCM funding. To be able to access this, you need to reach out to your CCM secretariat or to the current chair of a specific working group within the CCM. For information on who to reach out to specific countries, we also have it on our website, the list of the directories of the CCM, of your CCM, and also the CCM of other countries as well. On the right side, like what I mentioned, how to access some of these funding. I think that's the end of my presentation. Again, we will share the presentation later so that you can look it through more thoroughly. And if you intend to apply for any technical assistance request, you can reach out directly either to the embassies, such as in the case of the Backup Health and the initiative, or you can email us for the APCRG CRGPA request. For UNAIDS, I believe Michaela is here. If you have any additional questions, or if Michaela would like to share anything, we can use this platform. But before ending my presentation, let me now call on Vieng from TS Lao. And I'm gonna ask, Vieng, are you there? You can open your camera and your mic. I see Vieng earlier. Vieng has been. Hey, Vieng, good afternoon.
Hi.
So Vieng,
Good afternoon.
you are one of APCASO's focal points, and you've also applied for technical assistance through the APCRG platform. Can you tell us a little bit of context about the specific TA request and what the process has been for you, for those of us who are listening, to be able to have an idea of how it is in terms of applying for technical assistance?
Yeah, thank you, Sir Jeff, and thank you, APCASO, is to organize this meeting. So the experience from Laos, because Laos is the first apply for the CRG. So we receive CRG through technical support from both of the APCASO and also the French embassy. But it's coordinated by the ASEAN Pacific Network of People Living with HIV is the HARI. So we have we take regarding for, because Laos is the end of the Hansa project of the year 3. So we prepare for the midterm review and also the improvement of the civil society and key population engaged for the Global Fund support in Laos for HIV and TB, not malaria. So the CRG request, this is we have very quick approved from the Global Fund, because this is a priority for Laos as well. So now we already have the country already just complete the mission by last week. She's coming working on a consultation workshop with the community, and also we are now in the preparation for the country dialogue of the finding and result of that's the country dialogue. So I think that's the one of the comment and recommendation from the findings will be put into the Global Fund application for submission of the first quarter March by next year. But the country dialogue is still not conducted yet, because we have postponed. The government is postponed it, but now we are ready for the country dialogue because we have already a report on hand. Yes, I think this is the update.
Yeah. One additional question, Bieng, to you. What do you think is the most important component or element for organizations like Lao in applying for technical assistance requests?
Because in Laos, we have not much implement comprehensive package of the key population lead services for HIV and TB. So we would like to see in the component where is the gap, what is the capacity gap, and also what is the policy and guideline why the government or national program not allow the civil society and key population lead services for HIV and TB. So most of finding from the report is all, and the recommendation from the consultation workshop is already recommended that in terms of the community lead services for TB and HIV. This is one that's the CRG TA is looking specific priority.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bieng, and thanks for sharing with us your experience. I hope that by next year, the country dialogue will finally take place. Some of the learnings that you mentioned are really important for those who are intending to apply for technical assistance. So the urgency coming from civil society organizations and communities, the program essential, like you mentioned, really having an understanding of what the communities are that is aligned with the program essentials of the Global Fund is very important, because that really strengthens the need, the program need that needs to be implemented on the ground, and also being aware of the timelines of the process. I remember in one of our discussions, the HANSE review that's been ongoing and how it's linked into the next Global Fund funding request. You really have to be aware of these timelines to be able to ensure that you are properly engaged. So demanding to be engaged is one thing, but really being aware of what the process would be like is as important. So really, really thanks for sharing all those points. Okay, I'm opening now the floor for any questions. Thanks again, Bieng. I know you just stepped out of a meeting. Thank you really for the time.
Yeah, I'm now in Vietnam. It's the national LGBT platform.
Wow.
Great.
Hello to our colleagues in Vietnam.
Have a great time there. It's amazing. Thanks for your
That's
time.
great. This good forum. Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm opening the Menti again. And those who would like to participate, you can send your questions or comments through the Menti, or even use the chat box if you have any additional questions. So there's one question here, one idea in terms of the potential technical assistance request that they will focus on. This one is about engagement of young people of our diversity in the country dialogue, and also resources and platforms to identify the key asks for young people in our diversity. So looking at this specific technical assistance request, it's actually twofold. So the first one is the most urgent one, which is the participation in country dialogue. And I think I encountered one technical brief that says that with regards to diversity, that one country dialogue has ensured that they have representation of different gender identities, not only among trans men and women, but also those who identify themselves as non-binaries are included. I think it was in India or Vietnam in my conversation with Tung. So ensuring that young people from all diversity, gender and sexual diversity are included and represented. The second aspect is a more long-term request, so the resources and the platforms to identify key asks. There's a more urgent aspect into that, but the longer term really needs to be funded as well and supported. How about the others? Do you have any other ideas for potential technical assistance requests? Otherwise, Leslie, do you have any feedback or reactions from your end or any additional points to share?
No, I think just to say, I mean, I know it's a lot of information to process all at once, but you know, as you've heard, you know, this technical assistance can really support you in your efforts in the funding request. So, you know, whatever the thinking is, or if you'd like to hear more, you could, you know, contact the platform or myself about, you know, where it's really influenced and different examples to help you with your thinking. I know on the APCASO platform, there's a lot of information as well about, you know, previous TAs. So just to really encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. And yeah, and thank APCASO and everyone for joining today.
Thanks, Leslie. I wanted to end my session, and before giving the floor back to Jen, that the APCRG platform will be releasing a number of infographics and information materials next year, beginning January, around January of next year, hopefully, a number of information materials and infographics on the NFM4 process, the new features about the NFM4, an update on CCM 101. So we mentioned CCM today, so if you have any questions about CCM, you can refer to the CCM 101 infographic that we will release. A CRG 101, so that will complement the program essentials. So key issues and priorities that we can suggest in terms of community engagement, human rights, and gender equality and equity. And the submission windows that I've shared through the website will also develop an infographic on that as well. And on that note, I'm giving the floor back to Jen.
Thanks, Chef, for that really, really comprehensive overview of the various TA program and availability, what's available. I do want to just make a comment about the TA program and just to note that not all those TA programs, they are available in all the countries in our region. All those TA programs, they don't function or like in terms of the types of TA that they would deploy, they would support are the same. And also in terms of timeline for applying for some of those TA support, whereas for example, the CRG TA, it's meant to be short term. So the turnaround time, as you heard from Bien, could be rather quickly if we get everything in on time. The reason why I'm making all this point is I think that we could already, you know, start to think about and plot out, looking at the whole funding cycle, you know, between now and the submission timeline, for example, what are some potential TA needs? And as a platform, while we have a more direct connection and inlay into the CRG TA program, and we could support that more hands-on. We do also have the capacity to facilitate, whether that's to introduce you to, you know, the contact person for the expertise grants, just to make that introduction, to make sure that you're connected with the right person for the TA that you're interested in. We could also provide some feedback on where are some potential TA program that you could consider based on your needs. So all that's to say is we're open and we're here to support communities and civil societies as we move forward with the NFM4 process. In addition to the various information materials that we'll be making available, and many of those will be in translated format as well. Before I I make additional comments about next step or how we're going to follow up, Jeff has requested, if possible, can everyone turn on, that will take a group photo, just because I think for us, this might be the last APCRG webinar for the year that we're doing as well. We'll be having a new set of webinars coming out next year, but to help us celebrate that, you know, we made it to the to November, would be great if we could see all these amazing faces that join us today. And then Jeff, you let us know when you want to take a screenshot.
Sure. So let's wait for the others. If you're okay with turning on your camera, if not, that's totally fine as well. All right. Give us your best smile. 1, 2. All right. Others are opening their camera. All right. Best smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One more. Say APCRG.
That's a lot of letters.
All right. One more. All right. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. So don't go yet. Just let me wrap this up more properly. So in terms of what will happen after this webinar, we will be sharing the slides, including the recording, and please feel free to disseminate, to share throughout your network, throughout with your partners who you think might and would benefit from the presentation, the slides as well. Again, we will be including, you know, contact information from us for the groups to reach out. And then again, as Jeff mentioned earlier, we will also be doing some outreach to those of you who are here with us today to just follow up on the TA support aspect. Just to have, if possible, further more in-depth conversation about potential needs that you might be requesting and how we can better support that. If not directly through the CRG TA program, if we might try to make referral to, you know, UNH, for example, TSM, or with SUB TB partnership, for example, for the TB related support as well. Otherwise, I think we're doing really, really well on time. And again, deep appreciation to all of you, and so wonderful to see familiar and new faces today, and appreciating everybody for spending 90 minutes of your time with us today as well. We look forward to seeing all of you again on our next webinar. But again, we're here, and reach out. You have our contact information, anything you need, especially in the coming month with the funding request process. We're here, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of Leslie as well, from the Community Engagement Strategic Initiative as well. They're very, and they've been incredibly supportive and trying to mobilize additional resource for communities and civil society here in the region for our engagement. So with that, I conclude our webinar today. And again, once again, take care, everybody. Stay safe with the upcoming holiday season. I'm not quite sure how many people will be going on leave, but ahead of the Happy New Year to everyone. And see you next year. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Hey, Daksa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you so much.
Bye, Dasha. Bye, Nikki.
Thank you. Hey, girl.
So good to see all of you. Hi, Nikki.
Mhm.
Bye. Well.